Good afternoon. Joseph Priestley, radical, theologian, chemist, and philosopher. Quite a resume. He actually invented something really cool. He suspended a bowl of water above a vat of beer, and as the beer fermented, it infused the water with carbon dioxide. And he and his friends found that they created a very cool and refreshing drink. The water, mind you, not the beer. He had created Seltzer. Now, if you take a glass of seltzer water and you put it on a table and you drop a heap of ice into it, what do you get? Boom! An explosion of effervescence. The bubbles actually can hardly be contained in the cup because as they rise up and up and up, they will overflow the cup. To be effervescent really means at its root to boil up. And this boiling up excites the senses. It is contagious, uncontrollable, and messy. Here's my premise. We are the seltzer of education. Each one of us is a bubble that rises up through the cup, and as we reach the top, we spring forth great ideas to the surface. But it's time actually now to make a choice. And that choice is, are we going to get some ice? Are we going to put ice in the cup of education? Because we know this. If we don't get ice, the seltzer that sits in the cup will actually go flat over time. But if we infuse it with new ideas, new energy, and new enthusiasm, we can actually overflow the cup and change the educational landscape. That's pretty exciting. So what's our ice? Well, two things really. First is leadership. We've been kind of stuck, unfortunately, with this triangle of leadership. It's how we perceive the educational world works. It's a hierarchy that we've all kind of bought into. So what occurs in this triangle is, of course, that the superintendent is at the top. Underneath her, some deputies and associates, mid-level managers, curriculum writers, principals, teachers. I'm working my way to the bottom. And, of course, students. Students are at the very bottom of this, served by the crushing weight of a human bureaucracy. And if we accept this model, then we know that all the effervescence, all the energy is actually directed at the superintendent. Oh, but what happens actually if you flip the triangle? If you flip the triangle, something very, very different changes. Because now the superintendent has a much more challenging job. The superintendent now has to uphold an entire system and balance that system. That's really difficult and I would argue impossible for one person to do, right? So what they have to do is a good superintendent will then build leadership capacity throughout the entire triangle and will empower those at the top of the triangle to do good work. That's transformational change. Peter Senge is a systems thinker. He believes and has said that leadership is the capacity of the human community to shape its destiny and to sustain the significant processes of change required to do so. I love that quote. Leadership is nothing about position. Leadership is everything about vision and relationships. And if we accept that, then we know that the effervescence of this triangle is directed in the right direction, and that is towards students. That's a powerful change in the way that we see school systems, one in which Michael Williams, who teaches at Walter Johnson High School in Bethesda, Maryland, love Walter Johnson, and other folks from around the county, 10 teachers to be exact, started the Minority Scholars Program. They started it a few years ago, and this year they held a student march, and hundreds of students came out. They marched down Rockville Pike to the Rockville Town Center. What were they marching for? To protest the racial achievement gap. Guess who joined them? The superintendent, county council members, county executive, and other elected officials. Empowered leadership around a vision makes a difference. Empowered leadership has very little to do with position, has everything to do with passion. Yet in education, oftentimes, we love to admire the accident. We like to be able to describe the problem to anyone who will listen to us. We love to talk in detail about how difficult the problem is. We love to lament about it. and we love to play the victim at times, but we are not victims. We are leaders in our classrooms, and these past few years have made us battle-tested and tougher than ever before, and we are now prepared to take this leadership into the district level and into our very profession. Many people believe at this point that we are the underdogs in the educational environment. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, David and Goliath, says that actually we misread the battles between underdogs and giants. That what actually occurs when we think about it is that underdogs have tremendous ability to do one thing that giants can't do. Underdogs have freedom. And with that freedom comes with it agility and a certain amount of audacity. Underdogs can change the landscape if they don't accept the premise that giants always win. That's what happened at Mission Hill School in Massachusetts in 1997, where folks got together and created a democratically run school governed by a board of teachers, students, and parents. Leadership around a vision, leadership around freedom. That changes everything. Which takes us to the second of two pieces of ice, and that is how we associate with each other. Last year, in a poll, individually looking at teachers, what occurred was a Phi Delta Kappa survey found, and some of you saw this in the sessions this morning, that 75% of the American public has great confidence and trust in the men and women who teach our children. They love us. In the words of Sally Field, they really, really love us. But how about when we associate as a union? Well, when we associate as a union, not so much. In a Harvard study last year, only 32% of the American public believes that public teachers' unions are of benefit and have a positive influence on education. That's a stunning statistic. 75% believe that we as teachers do a great job and have trust and confidence, yet that level drops to 32. It talks about how we associate with each other. So there must be something in how we're associating with each other that matters. Let's take a step back, actually several steps back, in history and look to the guilds. Professional guilds were actually brought about by merchants and artists who wished to control their craft and trade in a particular town. And they did a few things. First, they actually vetted and trained folks new to the guild. They actually set rules and standards for the trade in their guild. And then finally, what they did was they held themselves accountable to those rules. That's a powerful thing because what occurs is within the community, they earned respect. Respect because they controlled the profession, and they earned protection because they were the experts in that profession. We could learn a lot from guilds. It's something that we do with peer assistance and review programs, where we train and vet new teachers. And who's better qualified to train and vet new teachers than teachers? We set the rules and standards for what makes for good instruction. And we hold ourselves accountable because we know that the craft of teaching is complex and it is rocket science. In doing so, we own the profession. We own teaching and learning. And when we own teaching and learning, we actually build the respect of a community. Think about building a bridge for a second. To build a bridge, you actually have to sink pilings deep into the river, right? The piling is deep, but it's very narrow compared to the river. Sometimes that's how we're perceived as educators. After all, we have very deep and rich content and pedagogical knowledge. But we're accused of not being able to see the big picture because we're somewhat isolated in our classrooms and in our schools. That's what's allowed national and state policymakers who have very little depth of understanding about what really goes on in schools to set policy because they can claim the breadth. Therefore, how we associate matters, and the role of an association is to collect all of those pilings, tie them together so that we have both breadth and depth. That's a game changer, and that is why we must change our associations. If we think about associations now, we are in a position which is unique, and we are in a position that is in a very, very good place. It used to be if I wanted to create a network, I had to go down the hallway, or upstairs in my school, or maybe across to another school across the town. Now, what I have to do is actually turn on my computer or use my phone. Social networks have allowed us to expand our profession and to be able to build a conversation around professionalism across a wide variety of platforms. Just this morning, the NEA Twitter followers surpassed 101,000 people. 101,000 people sharing ideas. That's a few more than my 500, but that's okay. What we have to do is we have to look at this because those networks, the GPS network, another great example, right? Collected around a series of about a dozen issues, right? Professional issues, moderated by teachers, discussed by teachers, owned by teachers. All of this is association around professional issues using an organic network that breaks out of the hierarchy. That's powerful. What we need is we need ICE by leadership, and leadership has to be about vision. And we need ICE by association around professional issues. In protecting our profession, we protect ourselves and we protect our kids. George Bernard Shaw said that a reasonable man seeks to adapt himself to the world. Yet an unreasonable one persists in seeking to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress is made by unreasonable people. I love that quote. The status quo is neat. Everything remains in this cup here on the table. It's easy to see where everything is, and often we leave it that way. But I would argue it is time to inject something into this cup. It is time to make it explode. It is time to overrun the cup. Because in overrunning the cup, what we get is we get a new landscape. Now, I can't tell you what that landscape does, and I can't tell you even what it looks like, and I can't tell you where it ends up. But I can tell you this, that it's contagious, and it's uncontrollable, and it's messy, and there are enough smart people in our profession to be able to dictate a much smarter reality at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest that it is time to be unreasonable. It is time to get some ice. Thank you.